Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and today we're once again looking at Canada's infrastructure market to compare and contrast the global scale of infrastructure investment ambition on that side of the Atlantic. In today's episode, it's my pleasure to welcome Jennifer McKelvie, Member of Parliament for Ajax, Ontario, and former Deputy Mayor of Toronto, who has, without question, emerged over the last few years as one of the leading voices helping to steer Canada's infrastructure investment transformation. So, first, a little bit of background. Canada stands at a pivotal moment in its infrastructure journey, from housing shortages and strained transit systems to the growing impacts of climate change. Yet this moment is also one of enormous opportunity. With a renewed federal focus on nation building, Canada is reshaping how it plans, finances and delivers the infrastructure that underpins its future prosperity. And in her recent address to the Transforming Infrastructure Performance Summit hosted by Bentley Systems in Toronto last October, Jennifer outlined an ambitious vision for Canada to accelerate the delivery of major projects. Key initiatives such as the launch of the Major Projects Office, establishment of Build Canada Homes and support for Canada Infrastructure Bank's expanding footprint really underline this as a moment defined by scale, speed and strategic intent. And of course, urgency to build and adapt in the face of increasingly uncertain political relationship with the United States and to prepare communities for the climate realities already unfolding across the country. So let's hear more. Jennifer, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Well, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, it's great to see you again since we last met in Toronto. Let's start off with your address to the TIP Summit in Toronto. There you spoke about infrastructure being nation building and it's essential to economic transformation. What do you see, Jennifer, as the biggest infrastructure gaps Canada must therefore urgently address?
Well, the good news is we've launched the Major Projects Office, which I think is really going to dive into what those infrastructure gaps are across this country and really work on fast tracking them. And I think we know that greening our energy and improving our electrical grid, those are certainly top of mind. But then there's also all those more local projects, and in Ontario specifically, so there's already 3 great projects that have been designated at different stages to the Major Projects Office. So the Darlington Small Modular Reactors, creating the energy that we need that is carbon free. The Crawford Nickel Project, which will be generating those minerals that we need. And the third in Ontario here being the Alto High-Speed Rail Project. So we're all very, very passionate about delivering infrastructure, speeding things up, getting people working, and importantly, getting the infrastructure that Canada needs right now.
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about the Major Projects Office, which it's a seminal moment for the nation in a moment. But there's clearly a shifting global landscape that you're facing, particularly from the US tariffs and geopolitical uncertainty. I mean, how has that influenced the need for Canada to really sort of build its greater domestic infrastructure capacity?
Well, we can be our own best customer. And certainly we are moving very quickly towards a buy Canadian policy. Mm-hmm. We've announced this week that all really major projects will go forward with that. We're working on the smaller projects to bring those on side. And, I can give you 2 examples right now. We know that the lumber industry and the tariffs are, really, really hurting the softwood lumber. But the good news is that we really want to ramp up building homes, and we want to ramp that up using sustainable materials like timber. And likewise, steel. We know that we need to be our own best customer when it comes to steel, given those tariffs that are on the steel industry, and, building rail, building modular reactors, building homes, all of that will use steel, and that will get people working. And that's, really what's needed right now to combat these tariffs.
That's being a lot more self-reliant, I imagine. Just making sure that you actually you're getting your internal markets going. But of course, we've also got climate change. How does climate risk now shape the scale and urgency of Canada's infrastructure needs?
Well, one of the things that I should point out is the budget 2025 that came out after the talk that I gave at the Transforming Infrastructure Summit. And one of the things that's included in there is the Building Communities Strong Fund. And we want to very much have a green lens on that. So ensuring that those infrastructure projects are, one, delivering, the core mandate of what's needed, whether it be hospital, colleges, universities, housing enabling infrastructure, but we're also doing that in a way that reduces emissions, and recognizes that we're going to have wilder, wetter weather under climate change. So the Build Community Strong Fund, very excited about that. We'll be rolling out intake for that in the new year, and it is $51 billion over 10 years for infrastructure. From the federal government, and the climate lens is very important there.
Well, that's $51 billion certainly focuses people's minds, that's for sure. I mentioned the word urgency, and certainly Canada is trying to really accelerate investment. You mentioned the Major Projects Office, created by Prime Minister Mark Carney, positioned as a game changer. So you mentioned it. How do you think it practically will reduce approval times and unblock those nationally significant projects?
Well, environmental assessments are important, and I think we all agree on their need, but we can streamline that process considerably. Right now, there are often approvals that are needed from the federal government, the provincial government, the municipal government, and can we streamline those into having a really solid MOU at the beginning of the project that outlines the different jurisdictions, the different roles, and really make sure that all levels of government are coordinated as we work through the approvals process. So I'm very excited by this. I think here in Ontario, the Darlington small modular reactors, they are like the first to go through this. It's an important job that will have 18,000 jobs during construction. And we can be a real global leader in nuclear energy and, potentially start to sell our technology to the world. So there's multiple benefits there. And we need to always make sure that, the principles of environmental assessment are there, right? Safety, environmental protection, those are always at the forefront. There is a way to ensure that is protected by removing multiple levels of red tape.
Well, it's interesting because we're also doing a lot of new nuclear in the UK, and I would later understand that we were the leaders, Jennifer.
Well, we're coming to overtake you. We're working on it.
Well, I mean, there are many, many projects which are going to be put through the Major Projects Office. What qualifies a project for an accelerated pathway through the new office then?
So it has to have some component of national interest. So certainly high-speed rail, for example, that's getting people moving across the region. Modular reactors, one technology that we can potentially sell globally, but also generating huge amounts of energy that is very needed to go through the transition to clean energy and to electrifying the grid. And you have to have a proponent. So that's one of the things to remember. And a good example of that is, the tunnel under the 401. Well, who is the proponent? Who is going to come forward with that private capital to put into that project? So whereas, with the Darlington small modular reactors, we have the proponent, OPG is the proponent. OPG is stepping up. They're bringing capital to the project. So those are the kind of some of the high level criteria that are required to be designated by the Major Project Office.
So it's when a project has got the momentum already and just needs that final push to get it over the line. Meanwhile, of course, you've got another initiative called Build Canada Homes, which represents what you described also as a major shift in federal involvement in housing delivery. Certainly, it's something in the UK, trying to get 1.5 million homes built is clearly it's not an easy thing to do. But you've launched the Build Canada Homes with an initial capital investment of 13 billion Canadian dollars, which is not an inconsiderable amount, and it aims to double housing construction, restore affordability, and reduce homelessness. That's quite a big package of ambitions there. So why is this new agency necessary then? I mean, how does it change the way fundamentally you get new homes built?
So there's a few things. So firstly, the first projects that were announced include $1 billion for supportive housing. And
that's sort of social housing, supportive housing.
Supportive housing. So supportive housing has wraparound services that are, on site 24/7. So this is for people with diverse abilities, perhaps people with mental challenges. So that is, it's independent living. They have their apartments, but they need that support to really thrive. So one of the things we're looking at with the supportive housing is having a portfolio approach. So can we have multiple projects come together using modular? And so you work to project 1, you immediately move over to project 2, project 3. We're having an established supply chain, bulk purchasing, which drives down costs. So, and of course, like our main core of Build Canada Homes is that we want to use Canadian materials. So Canadian lumber, Canadian steel, our Canadian skilled trade workers, which are, I'll say the best in the world. You can say it's UK, but I'll say they're Canadian.
But that's about the self-reliance thing. It's going back to the self-reliance thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Self-reliance and then modern methods of construction. So whether it be panelization or modular, et cetera. So that is one tranche of projects that certainly I think is one of the highest priorities. In addition to that, we are looking to accelerate building at 6 Canada Land sites across the country. For example, in Ontario, Downsview site has lands from a former military airport, military base. So we are looking to accelerate building homes there and at those other sites. So that is a fast tracking of approximately 4,000 homes. The third is over 700 homes in Nunavut, again, trying to use modular technology and, moving towards that kind of more bulk purchasing portfolio type build. And, it is extremely difficult to build in the north. We have to transport materials a long way. You're limited by ice roads and sea or ferry transport. But it is incredibly important and that we do this. And then that technology can then be rolled out everywhere across more rural northern Canada. And then the last tranche right now is $1.5 billion towards the Canada Rental Protection Fund. So this is to keep housing that is already affordable housing and really, help with those to keep that affordable in the long term. Buildings that might be at risk of demolition or units being converted to market rental, et cetera, really to try to help to keep that good, important stock of housing going.
Just for a bit of context, doubling housing construction, what sort of numbers are we talking about? How many units are you looking at a year or over the next 5 years?
So the goal is that within 10 years, we hit 500,000 homes a year. So that is roughly a doubling. So I think we're approximately on the order of about 240, 250 right now. And so we do need to step that up. And one of the things I've been pushing for as well is improving our data collection on housing starts, because it's not very granular. And I think it's important that we show how many are market rental, how many are market ownership, how many are affordable, how many are supportive, and that we can really show that we're building what is needed most right now in Canada, and that is affordable housing for the next generation. Yeah.
Well, certainly what it also does is it gives the market that kind of forward pipeline, the knowledge that's going to be work going ahead. And I mean, clearly that's really, really important if you're going to encourage private investment in. And certainly Canada's known for having a strong public-private partnership market. Is that model evolving now to meet today's infrastructure demands?
Certainly, I think so. We are looking to bring private equity in. We're seeing that with the Major Projects Office, for example, right? Like there has to be a proponent. Yeah. There needs to be some sort of contribution from the proponent to the project. I think our Prime Minister is very committed to ensuring that our dollars go further, faster.
Yeah. Well, I spoke with Divya Shah of the Canada Infrastructure Bank on the podcast recently, and she's got more than 100 projects underway, I think, with funds worth 35 billion Canadian dollars, which, in her words, is trying to unstick as many stuck projects as possible. I mean, what impact would you say that the CIB has had on closing those infrastructure gaps?
Well, I mean, the CIB is a wonderful Canadian institution, just like the CMHC, which does housing, the Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation. Yeah. But I think there is a recognition that, they are loans. They have a lot of stringent requirements. They function very much like banks. And that is why we do have the Major Project Office and Build Canada Homes now that are really helping with unsticking those. There's always some logistics that can stick up a project, from going forward, whether it be for infrastructure or for housing. And we're really trying to be more nimble. And ensure that we can get shovels in the ground, we can get people working, because that is the best way to tackle affordability, is to ensure that people have jobs, that people are then, that has added knock-on benefits. All this infrastructure creates direct jobs, but also all those indirect jobs as well.
That social benefit, certainly the social benefit is something I was talking to Divya a lot about, trying to make sure that every dollar that's spent is actually improving people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And, look, that Alto high-speed rail project, that's expected to create 51,000 jobs during construction, right? Like that's a lot of people working. Yeah. And, I think I mentioned the SMRs, 18,000 during construction, 3,700 in the long run, because there's a big operating component to that. In addition to that, we have a lot of programs right now that are being rolled out for youth, and especially youth in the trades and training in the trades. And we need to make sure that workforce is there for us. Yeah.
Well, you need to make sure that the jobs are actually on the horizon for the people you're training. That certainly is something which in the UK we're anyway struggling with. Moving from what they describe as a skills-led economy to a demand-led economy, where you're actually having jobs for those trained people. Clearly, you're enjoying yourself now in the national scene of politics, Jennifer, because last time I spoke to you, you were really focused in Toronto. What's the difference between the moving to that national picture for you then?
It is interesting. I loved my role at the City of Toronto, chairing the Infrastructure and Environment Committee. Over $1 billion of construction annually. The one main difference I think I'm just starting to see right now is, federally we're not responsible for snow. Right. I don't miss that. On some of the really big snowstorms, we could have, 300 calls into the office on a really big storm. And it's important to, set expectations around snow and snow clearing, and also show gratitude to those people that are out there overnight working while we are in our warm, really cozy beds. So I do love still the infrastructure, the environment files, and I'm still remain committed to my three big things that I worked with prior, which was the climate action, investment in nature and in our ravines and our stream systems, and public transit. Yeah. So those continue to be the things that drive me, and now I'm able to do that with a different platform.
Yeah. No, because I know why it amazes me, but Canada is a huge, huge country, and each of the provinces is very, very different. And I suppose when you've come out of one province, Ontario, and you're then looking across all of them, it must be quite a cultural shock. I don't know. Is it a cultural shock for you?
Well, I'm very fortunate because I was an environmental geoscientist before I became a politician. So I have done field work in Northern Ontario, Greenland, Yellowknife in the Northwest Territories, and Alaska. So, I'm very well aware of the logistical challenges of that, but also very well aware of how beautiful, the North is. And how wonderful, kind, and warm our Canadian residents are from coast to coast to coast.
Yeah. Well, a couple of other initiatives to discuss, Jennifer, on May. First is the Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund, which I think is $6 billion Canadian dollars has been put behind that, focusing on water, wastewater, storm water, and solid waste infrastructure. Interestingly, it requires provinces and municipalities to take action on their plans for housing density and construction costs to gain access to those funds. How will those conditions really drive behavioural change, do you think?
Well, the Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund is now going to be rolled forward into the new Building Community Strong Fund.
Right.
So of that, there is a $17.2 billion over 10 years that is designated towards hospitals, colleges, universities, and housing enabling infrastructure. And so they are requiring a match of the provinces and the territories. So we need to work through that. And on the housing front and the housing enabling infrastructure, it will be tied to ensuring there's a substantial reduction in development charges. We know that the existing paradigm is growth pays for growth. It has not been sustainable to do that on development charges and on reliance on property taxes. So we do need to figure out how we can encourage the provinces to help step up on infrastructure as well, so that municipalities can reduce those development charges, because new homes need sewers, waters, and the people that live there need transit, and they need community centers, and we need all the things that make a community vibrant. So that will be the work that lies ahead for the Minister of Housing and Infrastructure to work on negotiating those new deals with the provinces and the territories, and ensuring that we're using them to drive down the cost of housing so that everybody that wants to buy a home in Canada can.
Because it's a realization, a real explicit underlining of the reality that you can't just build homes and houses in isolation. You need to have that stuff that goes around it. So given the mountain of public funding committed, I mean, what scale of new infrastructure do you expect this fund to unlock? So
the funding is very much focused on water, wastewater, and roads. There is other funding in another stream that is for more of the community center type funding. But right now, as we're going through the engagement, that's really the starting point of what will be eligible and what will be included. And like I have heard from the engagement that we've done over the last few weeks on the Build Canada Strong Fund, that water and wastewater are the major need.
Right, yeah.
And whether it be new and laying new pipes for expanding into a new area, but also like upgrading for capacity. It's been also pointed out that stormwater is a major problem as well, especially as we start to deal with that wilder, wetter weather. Mm-hmm. So we're working towards all of that.
Yeah. Meanwhile, you've also got the Canada Public Transit Fund, billed as the largest federal transit investment in the country's history. There's a lot of records you're busting there, Jennifer, in terms of putting public money, making it available. It's got $3 billion Canadian dollars a year available to help provide long-term, predictable funding for transit projects. I mean, is the market now responding to this new environment of certainty?
We do have a lot of transit that is underway and under construction right now. The transit funding is also going to be rolled into this fund and ensuring that we have that provincial and territorial match. It is just absolutely incredible to see the amount of transit that's being built in the GTA area. Some of those projects are certainly behind. And one of the things that I have been advocating for, alongside many of the people in your Transforming Infrastructure group is, really the project leadership side of things, to make sure that these big transit projects, these big investments, they are finishing on time and on budget. And it's important that we do some lessons learned on some of these projects, like the Eglinton Crosstown, to see, how did we go so long on these projects? We are about to put $51 billion into infrastructure. We want to make sure that it is well managed, well run, using Canadian materials, Canadian workers, new methods of construction. But fundamentally, we also have to make sure we're delivering on time and on budget.
I mean, certainly it's an issue which globally, I think everybody in the infrastructure world needs to be learning an awful lot more from what they've done in the past, to try to learn from those lessons and make things work an awful lot better. I mean, what other types of new projects or upgrades across Canada do you expect this transit fund to make possible? You talked about high-speed rail, or is it simply a focus on making the roads better?
No, I think the transit fund is really important, and we know that this growth cannot be entirely sustained by the single occupancy vehicle. Like it's not sustainable. We already know we have congestion in most of our major urban centers. So public transit continues to be something that is important. It is included in the Building Community Strong Fund. And I think we need to cast that wide. It's also, for example, electric buses. And so one of the things I was very proud of in the city of Toronto is we had the largest fleet of electric buses in North America. We went out, we bought 20 buses from 3 different manufacturers and tested them in the Canadian winter to show this works, right? And we shared that with municipalities across the country. And then, Edmonton overtook us with the largest fleet of green buses in North America. Well, we had 60. They went out and they bought 61. So I think they wanted to get that championship back. So Toronto now has another massive procurement that's out for electric buses. More have arrived. So we have that green belt back. But, I'm here in Durham. Like, I'd like to see more electric buses here. We know they're quieter, they're cleaner. We've now demonstrated they can have performance that is just as good as the traditional fossil fuel buses. So a good transit system includes rail, buses, all coming and connecting together. Also thinking about like that, first mile on, first mile off, and how people get to there. So I think you're going to see a lot of innovation in transit in the years to come. And I certainly love when I am able to take transit where I need to go. It's just more efficient and I'm able to multitask, and it's just such a much more enjoyable trip.
Yeah, no. Well, it brings the last point, and you mentioned electric buses. It brings you on to the last point I was going to raise with you, which is around this investment for resilient infrastructure. Living in a climate changing world. You've got the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund, which is worth about 3.74 billion Canadian dollars. How is that helping the Canadian federal government to embed climate resilience rather than simply recovery into project funding?
Yeah, I mean, it's important to be proactive, and we have great examples of floodproofing that has happened throughout the GTA. And some of the best examples are down along the Don. Ensuring that as we build out those portlands that we have, they are flood protected, and we're able to, put those, tens of thousands of new homes, but not have them damaged in the future. We have a lot of work to do on the ravines, for example, and ensuring that the accelerated erosion that will happen from that wilder, wetter weather, that's protecting the homes that are along the banks. The ravines are like also a wonderful sponge for both water, but also for carbon, like the trees that are in there sequestering carbon, multiple benefits. So, the Natural Infrastructure Fund has been very instrumental in that. So we are currently reviewing all of our climate adaptation programs. There will be a new nature strategy and a new climate action strategy that will come out soon. And I'm very excited by that.
Well, it certainly sounds like it is a watershed moment for Canada's economic future. There's an awful lot of optimism, an awful lot of really kind of front foot money going into this. Looking ahead then, what for you, Jennifer, does success look like in 5, 10, 20 years' time? How will Canadians feel the impact in their daily lives of all this investment?
Well, I'm hoping that they feel their homes are protected from that wilder weather that's happening, that they have that resilience as well in their electrical grid, so that we're not having brownouts, we're not having power going down during storms. I'm hopeful that everyone will feel their communities are more resilient, but I also hope that we've moved to a point where that climate action is also very visible. They can see the new community center has a heat pump, and they can see it has electrical panels. and they know that, they can be part of the change too. And importantly, I think people want to back a winner. They need to know that we can do this. We can combat climate change, both by reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also by preparing for that weather uncertainties that is going to happen. So I'm hopeful we'll see everybody excited and wanting to be part of that change and feeling that they can be part of that change.
And on a wider national perspective, I suppose, of the wider infrastructure investment is all about driving, you put it nation building, but it's also about driving economic growth, I imagine. Absolutely.
I think the nation building projects, Build Canada Homes, will help to give that resilience to our steel industry, to our lumber industry, to all of our different manufacturers, that we have confidence that there is a market for construction in infrastructure and housing. And importantly, that our young Canadians are working in those jobs and see that Canada has a future for them.
Yeah, and I suppose that's something which governments in the UK, certainly around the world, are really kind of wrestling with. I suppose I should ask you finally then, what advice do you think the UK government perhaps can take from Canada's experience and with infrastructure funding and delivery? Any tips?
Well, I think they can buy Canadian. Maybe that's their tip. We have great sustainable products being made here in Canada, and we are ready to be their number one trading partner, because we know our relationship with our number one trading partner is not what it was, and we can't have the reliance that we once did on our friends to the south. So I think that I would leave the UK government with knowing that Canada is open for business and we're ready to partner.
Well, on that note, Jennifer, I think I'll pass that message on for sure. But it's really great to chat to you again and find out more about the challenges and clearly the opportunities for Canada, but also from the UK, by the sound of it, that you've got over there in Ontario and around the rest of Canada. So thanks so much for joining me today and sharing your thoughts.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for using your superpowers to build infrastructure and care about the Canadian economy.
It's an absolute pleasure. I love going over to see what you've got going on there, and I'm sure I will be back very, very soon, so we'll catch up when I'm there. So great to see you again. But sadly, that's all we've got time for today on the podcast, but there's more in the pipeline as we continue to probe the big issues faced across the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website, www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you'll find background information and all the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. So thanks for joining us. Thanks again to Jennifer, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.